Welcome back to the Brotherhood of Gaming video game review show, the only video game review show that can tell you that Dark Souls is not as hard as Castlevania 3, but equally as frustrating. I am your host, William Morris.
And I'm your co-host, Clayton Arnold.
For those who don't know, Dark Souls 2 is the sequel to Dark Souls, which is the spiritual sequel to Demon Souls. You play as a faceless main character that you create to personify yourself in a very dark and desolate world.
Constantly struggling to survive and retain your sanity against numerous odds while trying to end the curse of the undead. The Souls series has been branded as one of the most difficult game series in modern gaming.
Literally, absolutely giving you no edge or benefits whatsoever, but instead making sure that your pleasant trip here is just as miserable and as angry as possible.
Sounds like fun!
Yeah, I know, right?
Let's dive in and just see how hard this game is.
This is Dark Souls 2.
For those familiar with the Dark Souls franchise, they will notably recognize the world that they have been dropped into. Although the story isn't literally connected to its predecessors, Dark Souls 2 maintains the same world as before, as it shows. Quite some time has passed since your last venture. Newcomers should be welcome, and I use that term loosely, to a new character that they will make for themselves and discover that their plan is to ultimately rid the world of an undead curse, which prevents certain marked people from perishing. Those who don't pass on, unfortunately, get reborn time and time again and lose their humanity as each rebirth goes by.
Your character is quickly told the rules of the world. Explaining the odds are without a doubt against you beyond belief, and you will die time and time again. What happens from there is entirely up to you and your adventure to find the four great souls. While the story is indeed there, it's not blatantly written out. You must seek it to understand its lore. It's not presented to you as most other RPGs would do so. Only through interaction with NPCs will you further be able to understand the world you are in.
However, this game's focus is not as story-driven as you would expect. Its limelight is at the core of the adventure itself and gameplay. The adventure alone is what drives you. It feels inspired by the Tales of Dungeons & Dragons mythos. The beauty of this is in the eye of the beholder. Veterans of Dark Souls will be able to adapt to this new edition very quickly. Few things have been tweaked from the last adventure, but there have also been new additions. From the start of the game, you are introduced to your persona. You can freely use character creation to form the perfect character for you. Male or female, thin or fat, you get the idea. You can also choose a character class, determining what you will be good at, ranging from Deprived, which starts you off basically naked.
The Bandit class absorbs the Hunter from Dark Souls 1, which provides a bow and arrow with 25 available shots.
The Thief class is replaced by the Explorer class, which starts you off with a plethora of useful items, and only a dagger for a weapon.
Next we have a Sorcerer, who mostly deals with long-range magic damage. He starts off with 30 soul arrows, which are replenishable by sitting at a bonfire. This class is mostly meant for people who wish to play keep away with enemies.
The Cleric class starts off with a healing miracle and a mace. However, you have to wield it with two hands, otherwise it's less powerful. And then there is the
Swordsman class, which is the Wanderer. It retains the curved sword and starting armor, but now you have a short sword as the left-hand weapon. It has very low defensive capabilities and is purely on the offense.
Next, we'll tackle the Warrior, which is the Balanced class. The only class that starts with a shield and is average with statistics in strength and dexterity. However, other statistics are relatively low.
And last but not least, the Knight, whom has high starting HP and physical strength. Essentially a good class for a newbie. On a side note, there is no Pyromancer starting class like in the last game. You must choose as you would imagine yourself and your best playstyle. Each of these classes have been tweaked to be more individualized.
The melee classes, being swordsmen, knights, and warriors, are all about reactions, sticking to offense, then backing away to recover your stamina. Swordsmen having two weapons allow you to have varying weapon types, i.e. a straight sword with different animations than the curved sword, allowing for different responses to enemy attacks. The warrior, having a shield, allows you to mitigate more damage than the other two melee classes, in terms of blocking. The Knight, also a pure offensive class, has a starting weapon that is good for two-handed attacks on enemies.
The casting classes, being the Cleric and Sorcerer, are vastly different in their functions. Sorcerer relies on intelligence, while Cleric relies on faith. Miracles, like in Dark Souls, seem to be largely support-based, with a few offensive miracles as well. The Sorcerer is the magic class. Absorbing pyromancies back into the magic damage, as they were in Demon Souls, are largely offensive in their capabilities.
The mobility-based classes are the Explorer and the Bandit. The Bandit, having the bow, allows you to fight at a safe distance, as well as being able to now move while the arrow is notched, and when needed, switch to its hand axe for melee combat. It's more of a hybrid between melee and mobility. The Explorer, on the other hand, is all about mobility and timing. Having only a dagger, it's best to learn to hit back attacks as often as possible to compensate for lack of damage.
The Deprived is a bare-bones, stripped-down level 1 character. Having no starting weapons, you can use your initial armor that you start out with, and then go through the tutorial to get the dagger. This helps immensely, as fists are a lot less reliable in Dark Souls 2 than they were in Dark Souls 1. Essentially, he is a build-your-own style character.
For all classes, your shoulder buttons are your combat attacks: weak, heavy, parry, and block. Weak attacks will keep you moving without worry about much repercussion. Heavy attacks, though stronger, can and will leave you open for a shocking return fire. Blocking is easy to figure out. However, parrying your enemy attacks will require tons of trial and error, and even then, it's not the most reliable fighting tactic. This largely depends on your equipment, though. However, it is still a reckless tactic, period, depending on what you have equipped, that is. The triangle or Y button shift you from single-handed to two-handed, which can slightly increase damage with your swings.
Circle or B is your evasive maneuver and or dodge roll. Holding it down will enable you to run for a brief period as you have a stamina bar. It will constantly refill itself when unused, so fear not. It will not deplete permanently. The cross or A buttons are all for interactions. Square and X will use an item you have equipped to a certain item slot. Pressing directions on the D-pad will manipulate your equipment for easy access. Pressing Start will bring you to your character's menu selection. Here you can equip tons of items you find during the game. While finding new weapons and armor and items sounds easy enough, how much your character can actually equip is the problem. Looking at your statistics as well as the demand of the item will tell you just how able you are in using it. So if you think out of nowhere a sorcerer or mage type character is going to wield a giant fuck-off sword, you're dreaming.
Luckily for you, there are ways to level up your character's gear and physical statistics. How well you play the game is going to be a key factor in this. The game is all about finding and collecting these things called souls. You treat these as currency and your way to leveling up. Unlike in other RPGs where you gain experience from defeating your foes, instead, you gain them by spending the soul currency to upgrade yourself. Only after doing so, you can freely use whatever weapons you see fit for the situations. While all of this seems pretty well thought out and simple to understand, well, don't be fooled. This is no pleasant adventure. Dark Souls 2, and in general, gets its reputation by making enemies extremely tough to handle. The damage output is almost incredibly realistic to the point where one good swing from an enemy's blade will be enough to end your game. Multiply the enemy ratio by 5, and you have an open wilderness of levels, hidden dungeons, vast sites, and castles crawling with nothing but the most dangerous of adversaries, wanting nothing more than to make your life hell. Losing just once to any of these accidents waiting to happen will force you to drop all of the currency that you have obtained up to that point. If you can manage to get back to the area you perished prior, you can pick all of them up. Sadly, it's easier said than done, as every time you'll die, you will end up treading back to the nearest bonfire checkpoint that you had set for yourself.
While traveling, you can find various ways to join covenants, some of which allow players from their game to join you and aid you in your quest. Dark Souls 2 does amazingly well to represent a true action-adventure, dungeon crawler role-playing game. Its vast open world sucks you right in with tons of hidden sights to see, treasures to obtain, wrongs to right, foes to fight, deaths to cringe at, controllers to throw, Sad to say, to a lot of people, this game will blow.
As you travel the world map, you will find these rest areas called bonfires. Here, you can rest to regain your health as well as spells for later use. Whenever you die in the game, the last bonfire you sat at will be your respawning checkpoint. A nice new feature was added this time around. For all of the bonfires you set up, they will act as quick jump locations, allowing you to quickly travel between them without having to literally backtrack worlds apart. The only downside to sitting at bonfires is that it will reset the entire area that you sit in, which means you can't fight enemies, defeat them, and then go think that you're going to be fine sitting at a respawn point, because it doesn't work that way. The enemies will do the same. The music for Dark Souls 2 does nothing more than set the tone and mood for the adventure that you're on. It's quite moody at times and almost is a little bit depressing. It does well to sink you into its world of hopelessness. Well, I gotta admit, it does its job very well, and it's a pretty good one. Just don't bust out the MP3 player, because you're pretty much not gonna find any real memorable tracks here that you're gonna bust out at work.
The graphics themselves are very appealing to the eye. While rough at some points, its roughness fits with the decaying world around you. From torn clothes to emaciated shopkeepers who are near hollowing, it all helps to enhance the mood set by the gameplay and the music. Careful, or you might find yourself getting stabbed in the back while gazing in awe at the world around you.
Dark Souls 2, like its predecessors, are done amazingly well and do their job to the best of their ability. They certainly don't hold your hands like today's modern games do, but instead they do their utmost to make sure not to undermine the player's intelligence and to make sure that you are treated with the respect of gamers of old.
They drop you into a world and give you all the options you need to make your warrior the way you want, to complete the game the best way you know how. This is what gaming is about.
Sure, it's a hard son of a bitch, but Dark Souls 2 is actually incredibly difficult. So difficult that it's just hard enough to keep the player grinding enough until they can finally complete it. Most casual gamers probably are looking for a normal action adventure and a fun game. While Dark Souls does basically supply that, it is far more advanced than you can probably imagine.
Gamers looking for a thrill, look no further. In today's modern age of gaming, Dark Souls 2 will remind you just how far we've come. Well, no, Dark Souls 2 is not for everyone. It does provide a challenge for die-hard gamers looking for a thrill.
Working together in Dark Souls 2 is actually one of its strongest highlights, and it's what gamers around the world should be striving together to do. It's not about competition.
But a plethora of fun, joining in arms with your fellow warriors to complete a single goal and to win together.
Well, boys and hollows, that wraps it up for another video game review from your favorite video game show, thebrotherhoodofgaming.com. I am your host, William Morris.
And I'm your co-host, Clayton Arnold.
Until next time, keep on gaming, viewers, and please feel free to drop a like, a comment, all of that good social networking stuff, because we love you, and it's what we do. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.